Okay, so we are actually going to get started and we'll let people join in as they come. So myself and Sophia will be hosting this. I know most of you guys came from before, but just again, I'm part of the PAT team. So I support Jenny, Laura, and Deb, just approving the intermediate, the introductory, and advanced level courses. You can find me in COM 103, that's right next to SPO, or you can visit Laura and Deb or Jenny in Playa Vista to get help on anything that you need. SPO people are also amazing. So our lovely Sophia or Tyler in Playa Vista office, please feel free to use them as resources. They're nice and they're here to help you get on top of everything. Sophia, you can give yourself another introduction.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Sophia Costanzo. I am the SPO GA in Comm Arts. So if you need anything, I'm here in 106, just next to Jessica. And we're going to be talking about permits today. I'm also going to toss it to Tyler, too. You might as well introduce yourself, Tyler, and talk a little about yourself. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm the grad assistant at Playa Vista. How about Jenny a lot of the times, take some load off of Sophia. You can find me at the Playa Vista campus. I forget the exact room that we're in, but it's all mostly for grad students. So I guess, yes, thank you. BRY 283. You can visit me anytime. I'll be working there a lot. Pretty good with movie magic, permitting. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come by. And I'll drop my email too. So you can always email my line email too. And I get back pretty quick.
And Sophia and I will do the same once more. So we'll pop that in the chat right now. Amazing. So we are here today to talk about permits. So I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll have you guys all follow along. So let me just get that started here. So we will be covering permitting for on campus as well as off campus, just to make sure that you guys are all set and you know exactly what to do. So let me just share my screen. Please let me know if you guys can see my screen okay. Okay, perfect. And then Sophia, I'll have you or Tyler or Jenny kind of monitor for questions just because I'm sharing, I'm not able to see everybody's faces. So feel free to support there. So just as a table of content, we're covering everything you need to know about obtaining permits, including when to submit, what to DIY at home, how to obtain on-campus permits as well as off-campus permits through FilmLA. And then we'll just highlight some of the troublesome locations that you probably want to avoid. And then we'll have questions at the end, but also feel free to ask them throughout. So permits. So you need permits in order to film on campus or off campus. This is something that you do not just for LMU, but you will be doing this in the industry as well. Permits are an agreement between you and the location of the filming activities that you'll be conducting during an approved amount of time. So we're just making sure that wherever location you're filming at, that they're okay with you being there so they don't have to call any authorities. And if anybody shows up trying to be nosy, you can say, yes, I do have permission to be filming in this space, because depending on your neighborhood, there will be some people who might try to shut it down just out of nosiness, or, you know, nothing's going on with their lives. So just don't even give them any fuel to the fire. Have yourself covered. So there's 3 different types of permits or 3 different types of locations that you will be filming at. The first is DIY at home. So that means you're filming at home only with the people you live with. That includes off campus or LMU residence halls. On campus is you're filming just anywhere on campus. You'll just get permitted for that. And then off campus, you are filming at a location off campus. It could be a residence, it could be another place within the 30-mile residence of 30-mile radius of LA, or with PAT approval, you can film outside of that. We just need to make sure that we cover everything. We'll get into more details in the coming slides. So when to submit your permits, let me admit some people to the room. When to submit your permits. So you should be submitting your permits 5 to 8 days in advance of your desired filming date. So definitely 5 days in advance if you're filming a DIY at home on campus, and then 8 days in advance just in general. You just want to keep that just in case anything comes up last minute. you want to make sure that you're covered and you're able to film for the day that you plan for. So DIY at home. So DIY at home, again, that's filming in your personal residence only with your people you live with. So you're not bringing out anybody, you're not bringing in anybody extra. You're not bringing in a DP that lives on campus and you live off campus. It's only the people that you live with as your cast and crew. So again, DIY at home, we don't require any permits for this unless if you're filming on campus. So if you live off campus in your apartment and you just want to film with your roommate or maybe your girlfriend or boyfriend, just make sure that you put that you're only filming with the people you live with, no outsiders, and you're good to go. If you are filming on campus, maybe your dorm or your apartment or your residence hall, just let us know and we'll direct you on the permit application to the approval form for housing. So a DIY at home checklist. So these, you can all find this in the production handbook, but basically the main points are there's no visitors, only those you live with. You can only film inside your property or on your property. If you live in Playa Vista or Playa del Oro apartments, they don't actually allow filming outside of your home at all. They've had a bad history with that with LMU students, so they just keep it contained inside your home. If you do live on campus, again, you'll fill out that permit application. Some other points just to note is there's no prop weapons that can be used as a DIY at home, and then no open flames, smog, or fog. Again, you can find this in the production handbook. So next, we'll get into the on-campus permits through our OnTap platform. So much as you went to the OnTap platform to get your production request, that's also the same platform that you will go to submit your on-campus permit request. So filming anywhere on campus requires a permit, even if it's your own dorm room. We just want to make sure that all our campus proctors be safe, they know what's going on. The reason you need this also too is that there's a lot of events that always happen on campus. So we just need to make sure that they know what's going on in case you don't have to get shut down and then basically ruin a whole day of filming. So what you will need before we start, I will have Sophia walk you through how to submit a permit. But before that, we want to make sure you have your production number. So once you've submitted your production request, those are the 4 numbers that you'll need. So it'll be SFTV-0457, something like that. You can find that in your email. Once you submit your production request, you'll get a notification email, or you can navigate to the dashboard, which we will show you how to do. And you can find your project number just there on the dashboard, and you'll use that to submit your permit because we need the permit attached to the correct project and production request. You'll also need your exact dates and time. So a lot of people, especially for like the beginner or intro level courses, they just say, oh, well, I permitted for 7 days from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. because I had class. I don't know how to kind of secure the times of my actors or their availability. So I wanted it to be a blanket permit. We don't do blanket permits like that because that prohibits other people from filming. Think of it as filming, or think of it as maybe as reserving a room in the library. We want to make sure that it's very specific so that other students can also film in those areas as well. So kind of just be more specific with that. Next, you'll need a description of your actions for the location. I think it's important to note that this is not a description of action of your whole entire film. This is just particular to the exact location that you're filming at. So you'll want to make sure that you have that. You'll also need to have the number of cast and crew for each location, and as well as the staging. So say total, maybe this is a 390 production, you have 15 people total. However, for this on-campus location, you only need 5 people. Only put those 5 people and put where they're going to be staged. If they're going to be there within the same room, just have that ready so that when you do submit your permit, you have all of that information available so that the proctors don't even have to push back. Remember that there's only 1 location per permit, and exteriors and interiors of the same location are separate permits. So say you do want to film in a residence hall and you're filming in a dorm, but then you also want to film outside of that same residence hall, say Rains or McCarthy. Those are 2 separate permits, one for the interior and one for the exterior. So please keep in mind. The next thing I'm going to show you guys before we begin are just some things to note. So basically, some locations are easier to permit than others. So just please keep that in mind. Permits for Hilton, Hannon Library, and Seaver, they're a bit tougher to obtain. Their proctors are very particular, especially with the library. So make sure you have enough time to submit that permit and be ready with another location if they say no. Another thing is the Bird's Nest and the Sacred Heart Chapel, they don't allow filming of any kind. So don't even try to film inside the Sacred Heart Chapel or the Bird's Nest. You might consider the Bluff or Lot H or Com Arts. Those are some easier locations that you can be able to film in. Another thing would be classrooms. So classrooms may not be available to film during the week, so keep that in mind. If you want to shoot in a classroom, say in St. Rob's or Youll, the weekend would be the best date for that because there's classes going on through the week. So keep that in mind. And lastly, the university has some blackout dates that could interrupt your plans. For example, family weekend is February 17th through the 20th. So they might have that, or sometimes they host weddings or special meetings with some of the stakeholders of our university. Keep that in mind and give yourself enough time to permit in case you need to change your date. I'll have Sophia add in the chat, if she hasn't already, the blackout dates link, which you can also find in the production handbook. So next, we're gonna have Sophia share her screen. Basically, she's gonna give an example of submitting her permit to apply a Vista location using her production number. And that location, she's gonna show you, it's gonna automate and show you who's the proctor for that, which is Jenny. She's the proctor for that. So she's in this training and you can kind of get a better overall view of how it's done. And then at the very end, she will also show you how to get back into your permit in case your proctor, this time it would be Jenny, if in case she has any comments like, okay, where will you be staging people, or just additional clarification, she might talk to you within that collaboration stage. So I will stop sharing and I'll let Sophia share.
All right, everyone, I'm going to share my screen in just a second, but I'm also going to drop in the link again to the workflow dashboard in case this is something you want to have bookmarked. You can also find this through our handbook website, which I dropped the link for as well. As I'm going through, give a shout if there was a link or something that you missed in the chat. I'm happy to drop them in again. So that's our dashboard link, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So once I've navigated to the dashboard, if you were here before for our first training, this might look a little bit familiar. I'm going to review just in case some of you were not. So this is my dashboard for OnTap. So again, if I'm looking at this, like Jessica mentioned, I need my production number in order to submit a permit. I know what my production number is based on either the email I received will have that information, but in case I forget, it's also right on this OnTap dashboard. So for this project, it's SFTV-0262. So this was the project that I submitted. Your production number is going to look really similar. It's going to be that SFTV and then 4 numbers. So mine's 0262. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that just to make life easier. And I want to go to select my workflow. But this time, if I scroll down, we have a tab called SFTV On-Campus Permit Request. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And then I'm going to click on Start Workflow. Once I hit this, the first thing it's going to ask me is for that production number that I just told you about. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Enter Name of Workflow Record. And I'm just, ooh, I'm not going to do that, I guess. I was going to copy paste, but it copy pasted too much. So we're going to type it in. So it's going to search and it'll find my number. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. And it takes a moment just to load. So be patient with it. Sometimes students will hit submit right away and then it gets kind of messed up. So just give it a second, because what it's going to do is it's going to auto populate with the information I already put in for that production. So once I submitted that file and got my production number, everything was saved. So it saves you a lot of time too, because you don't have to retype it. So it has my banner ID, my email, my class level, phone number, etc. It already knows my CRN, which class I'm submitting for. So it's really helpful because that's all in. My type of production's already there. My script title's already there. My producer's there. So that's all auto-filled. At this point, we're going to hit on next. So when I click on next, it gives me certain details that I have to fill in. So if you've done your production submission at this point, it's going to look pretty similar. It's just asking for some different things. So we're navigating it very similarly. So I'm going to start with my location. So if I click here, we actually have a lot of our locations listed. But since that's a lot to go through, one thing I can do is go ahead and type it in. So let's say I'm filming at Playa Vista. I'm going to type that in and now I can see the different options. So let's say maybe I'm in the student lounge. And then it's going to autofill the contact, which is Jenny, who's on this call. So thanks, Jenny. So she'll actually receive this request to approve. And then it's going to ask me for my location schedule. So what day am I filming there? So let's say, I'm supposed to submit this about 8 days out. I don't know. I'm going to add like 10 days to say, make it easy. So let's say I'm filming there on like January 24th or something, because I'm prepared. 2022. I'm prepared, and I'm like, trying to get ahead. And let's say I'm going from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. If I had another date there, I could go ahead and add a row, and maybe I'm also filming there on the 25th from the same time. And then if you needed to and you added by accident, you can always click on this little trash can to delete a row. But essentially, you're just adding in your dates that you're there, you're adding in your times. Under action sequence, I'm going to go ahead and describe what is happening there. So I might say something along the lines of 2 students have a conversation in the student lounge. Number of cast and crew. Again, we're allowing you up to 15. So I'm going to just say 15. And it's going to ask me if this set requires interior, exterior work, or both. So in this case, I'm going to do interior work. If it's something where it was both, I'd recommend that you go back to that description and really describe the outside portion as well and where you're going to be. But for this case, I'm just in the student lounge. It's just interior. And then it asks me if outdoor amplification is requested. I'm inside. That's no. Typically speaking, even if you're outside, it's probably going to be a no. You most likely don't need that for your production. Next, it goes into asking you more about personnel and equipment. So what's the total number of participants in the room? So in this case, it would be 15. The student lounge is pretty big. It gives me space that I could spread my crew out. So as you guys are location scouting or thinking of these things, it's important to keep that in mind too. Where are you going to put equipment? Where are you going to stage crew? So just keep that in mind. Potential noise level, we're a quiet bunch. We should be quiet. Students might be there. So I'm going to say low. Will furniture be moved? In this case, no. I like the setup. Food and beverages in the room. Yeah, maybe I'll have crafty or we'll have lunch. But again, think about those things as you're scouting and going through, that you have the space to do that, or can you sit outside and eat, or different things like that that are just good to keep in mind. I'm not hanging anything on the wall. I don't have minors in my film. Maybe I do have props being brought in. Then you're going to have this dialogue that pops up that basically asks you what those props are. So maybe they're, studying or something. So I might have textbooks, notebooks, pens and pencils. Intended source of power is basically asking where you're going to be plugging in your lights or any batteries, things like that. In this case, it's probably going to be wall outlets, but that's something too, just to keep in mind as you're looking at location of where can you actually plug things in. If you're filming in a house, you probably want to know how much you can plug in without blowing out the house lights or things. So definitely talk to your gaffers and make sure you have a plan for this. So in theory, these are all things I already talked about with my crew, or I have an idea of. And then it's going to ask me for my staging area for equipment, craft service, and cast. So maybe we'll say like in the student lounge, maybe I have space where like equipment will be staged in the student lounge away from filming. Same with like, I know at Playa Vista, close to the student lounge, we have sort of that dining area. So like dining area might be used for lunch and crafty. And maybe the cast is just going to be staged in the student lounge too, because we have the space, or there's makeup rooms there. So, you're going to fill that out to the best of your ability. Try to keep it specific. And then the permit goes into your student film agreement. So it's basically going to ask you a couple of questions, which you do have to agree to film there. So we're going to go ahead and check them off. That props aren't going to be nailed on the wall. We're only going to use blue tape if we need it. No interior smoke effects are being used. So we agree. All power cords are going to be taped down because we're safe and no one's going to trip on this set. All campus policies will be followed. We're going to make sure everything looks the same as before. If you're worried about that, my recommendation is take a photo of the space and then you can put it back. So any damages are going to be billed to you, we agree. All student housing policies have to be followed if you're doing student housing, and completion of this form does not guarantee that it's available. So we're essentially doing this as a request. It's still going to have to be approved. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. I'm going to sign my name. and then it's going to automatically date it. Just to let you know, if you hit save by accident instead of submit, I'll show you how to access that again, but we're going to want to make sure that we hit submit so this is processed and Jenny gets a request. So I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. And my on-campus permit has been received. So that's really great. And they're going to notify me when the permit request has been approved by the building proctor. So just for an example, I'm going to go ahead and click on exit workflow. And I'm sure I want to exit. And if I go back to my dashboard, that permit is this one right here. So I can tell that it's a permit because the coding for it is PRMT. So it's different from my project. Let's say I needed to get back into this permit for a second or check on something. If I click on these three dots, actually, I don't know if I see it yet if it's not approved, but essentially you can make, once it's like process, there's an edit request button where you can actually go ahead and make changes on it. I don't think edit looks the same. Yeah, edit does.
Yes, and then if I'm gonna hop in for 2 seconds,
Go for it.
yes, the reason why edit request is not there is one, either it hasn't gone to the next stage or Jenny hasn't invited you to the collaboration stage. So once she comments and says, hey, I've received this, that will make the OnTap system allow you to hit edit request and then go back in.
Yeah. Exactly what Jessica said. For the sake of this for a second, I'll go ahead and do an edit request on my production. It'll look the same for permits, but just so you guys can see it if you weren't here earlier, there is that collaboration stage Jessica mentioned where people on this right section under discussion could leave you notes. So if Jenny had any further questions or needed you to upload anything else, or a building proctor had questions, you would get an email saying they commented here. So that's something that you can access as well. And if I were to comment back to someone, I could essentially put in their email or their name and it would pop up and be like, hey, Laura, thanks for the note, and type something back in and add a comment back to them. So you can communicate with your proctors here as they give you information. And again, you'll get emails as people do that. So even though this is my production, it looks very similar on the permit where once that collaboration stage is entered, you can communicate with different people. So yeah, that's essentially how you're going to submit an on-campus permit.
Perfect. Thank you, Sophia. And then you will do that for every single location that you have. So say she wanted to film in Playa Vista, then the Bluff, then the Pavilion, she will submit a permit for each particular on-campus location. Thank you so much for that beautiful walkthrough. Does anybody have any questions on that before we continue? Okay, so it's looking like a no, but if you have something, please feel free to pop it in the chat or like just say, hey, Jessica, can you stop and ask the question real quick. So I'm gonna go now into how to obtain permits for off-campus locations. So I'm gonna share my screen one more time. Okay, great. So for off-campus permits, you will either be using FilmLA to obtain your off-campus permits, or you might be getting an exemption from the city that's outside of Los Angeles if you're approved by PAT. Just note that unlike DIY at home, if you're having like all your production crew come to your house, you will need a FilmLA permit. All right. So in terms of the different types of off-campus permits, there's FilmLA, which you can obtain through their FilmLA website, which we will walk you through on how to set up an account today. There's a permit for non-FilmLA. So say you wanted to film in Las Vegas or Nashville, Tennessee, or New York, you're able to do that. You would just have to reach out to that city's film commission and ask if they can provide you a permit. So just to note, our productions are way smaller than the industry level productions that they're used to. So they might reach out to you and say, oh, you don't need a permit. And that email will serve as your permit or a permit exemption, as you see on the right. So they might just say, you're fine, we don't need all of this, and then you're set to go. So what you'll need, so before we even begin with getting through this, the production handbook is your best resource for the FilmLA process. Sophia has dropped that in the chat for you. This is the resource you need. It really breaks down everything that you're going to need for FilmLA. Another thing is the FilmLA also has a link for student filmmakers. So it just shows you what you'll need for different student filmmakers. So things to have ready before you begin. Of course, you're going to need the address of your desired location. So you're going to need to know where you're going to be filming, add that address into your FilmLA permit request, and that'll be there. You're also going to need the number of cast and crew at that location. This information is very important to them. They want to know who's going to be there, what level of capacity that they should be planning for in case they need to notify nearby businesses or residencies. You'll also need to know the number of cast and crew vehicles that's going to be there, including production vehicles. So are you renting an Avon truck, a U-Haul? Like they need to know what's going on. They'll also need, with that, they'll need to know where you will park if that's applicable to you. Usually off-street parking is best, but they're just going to want to know all of that. They're going to also want to know where your camera and crew will be staged. So keep that in mind, especially if you're one of the advanced level courses. Also, too, you will need $30 ready for payment. That's required before you can actually submit your permit request to FilmLA. And that $30 permit is valid for up to 10 locations with a span of 2 weeks. So that kind of gives you a lot of flexibility within that $30. And to show you how like blessed you guys are as students, regular productions begin at $800 and they will add on additional fees based on the scope of what you're filming. So comparing $800 to $30, you're getting a pretty good deal as a student. So definitely use that to your advantage. So after you submit, one thing to expect is they're already going to ask you for a FilmLA student verification letter, because sometimes like lying emails might be available for a little bit longer than they should. And people think that they could take advantage of it. FilmLA is like, nope. We already know that game. So they're going to ask you to have somebody from the administration team submit that. So that's when you would reach out to either myself if you're an intro level, Laura, Deb, or Jenny. And that's all you have to do is forward that email to them. They will take care of the rest and verify that you are a student using your production number. Finally, you'll need to make sure that you check your emails and follow up with your FilmLA coordinator to make sure that everything is delivered safely. So before we submit, basically you just need to know that like you're explaining to them like how your film looks like and what you're doing. And just remember your film is pretty small in comparison, like we live in LA. So it's small in comparison to some of like the massive like film sets that you're seeing. So they just want to know that like, you know, with the 15 people that you have, where you're staging them, where you're going to park, do you have a production vehicle, a dolly, things of that nature. And another thing you want to do is you want to be honest. So don't withhold important information, especially if that makes a big difference, because if something goes wrong, you will get in trouble for that. So just be open. If anything, you can ask us and we can kind of let you know what might be required. Before we get into the FilmLA account setup, just also keep in mind that you might need to reach out or email info@FilmLA, because they might not let you know some of the things that you need until the last minute. So even if you submit like, oh, I'm like a boss, I submitted a month in advance or 4 months in advance, they prioritize what they go through based on the week that it's filming. So if you submitted 4 months in advance and you're filming on Friday, you're ready, you're set to go. And then on Tuesday or Wednesday, just 2 or 3 days before you're filming, they reach out and say, hey, by the way, you need to get 1,000 signatures. That's an exaggeration, but like you need to get signatures of a 500 foot radius, or you need to make sure that you have businesses sign. Be aware of that. So sometimes you can kind of cancel that step by saying, hey, I want to film at Venice Beach. Am I going to need a lifeguard? Am I going to need a police? Like what's going on? They can give you that information so you can plan in advance. And you can also talk to the PAT team with myself included, and we can let you know like, hey, like if you're trying to film here, I can already tell you that even though they say it's okay now, you're going to need this, this, and that. So please keep that in mind. So next, Sophia is going to take you through how to set up a FilmLA account. And then at the end of the day, we will ask just get questions that you have, give you some troublesome locations and break it down. But we want to make sure that your account is already set up so that when you come to any of us, we are ready and your account's already set up and we can just help you and dive in. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. And so also, we have a question in the chat.
I'm
from
sorry.
our lovely Jenny.
Okay.
Would you suggest a student request a permit for the day before they need it?
Jenny, thank you for that question. The answer is no, I would not request that because it's not going to be approved. And FilmLA, they will be mean about it. So definitely don't do that. You want to make sure you give yourself ample time, even for your own blood pressure. Like, you guys are too young to be stressed like this. Just submit it in advance on the FilmLA website. They have all those guidelines. Usually it's do 3 to 4 days is like the latest before you plan to shoot, is that they allow. And even with that, you want to make sure that if you do cut it that close, it's really for maybe a house in your neighborhood, and be already prepared to get signatures, notifying the neighbors, especially if it's like Westchester, because they're so used to LMU students filming. They just want to have like a quick notice. So definitely give yourself enough time, because even though you submit it and it's like, oh, that was easy, I submitted up to 10 locations, I'm good. Our very own Sophia here submitted her thing well in advance. She did everything she needed to do. She even checked up on it. And then just a few days before the production that she was producing, they said, hey, you need to get the signatures of all these businesses, making her miss class. I mean, you can tell that story your own, but it's just like, she did it all well. So you just want to make sure you just stay on top of it, communicate with us, communicate with your coordinator, and be prepared for them to bring up something.
Yeah,
I actually, I'm sorry, my question actually, I probably worded it wrong, was if somebody's shooting on January 22nd, should they put on their permit that they want to shoot January 21st?
Oh, okay. So usually FilmLA, they do have something where there's prep time. So you can add that to your permit. So you can add that to your permit request, but maybe you don't want to film at that time, but you want to give yourself enough time to where, in case they add something, just add that as a prep time. So it's almost like an audition to your real filming. I think it's best to just put the days that you're filming. However, if you do feel comfortable putting the day before, it couldn't hurt. You're allowed to film for multiple days with FilmLA, but I would just add the prep time if you don't plan on filming there. That way, you don't have to do additional work.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like, just to expand on, I think either way you interpret that question is a good question, because we definitely get both of them here in SPO. When you are submitting to FilmLA up to 10 locations, you're not going to be priced over $30. Sometimes there's exceptions to the $30 as a student, but for the most part, whether you do 1 day or 3 or a week, or which you can really only do 3 at your level, but you're still staying at that amount. So if you think you're going to need an extra day for FilmLA, just put it down. It's always editable. You can be in touch with your coordinator. I've had times where a day moves and I just email my coordinator. I can edit on the dashboard. So you have that option with FilmLA, but I would always say better safe than sorry. A lot of times students come in too, like Jessica was saying, where they have prep, where maybe you're shooting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but you also book the location Thursday for PD, or because your crew's going to drop off equipment. It's worth having that on the permit because you're still going to have people there at that time. So you could do a prep day or add that as a production day. So hopefully that kind of answers it both ways. But like Jessica was mentioning too, really with FilmLA, they do say you can submit up to 3 to 4 days in advance, but I would still recommend going early. The story Jessica is sharing, we had a two very difficult locations on a shoot I was on. One was a grocery store and one was actually a pizza place on Abbott Kinney, which is a very highly trafficked area. And I definitely learned a lot about that, but I actually submitted my permit a couple of weeks in advance, knowing they were difficult. And then I was in touch with my permit coordinator. So it's not bad to do it early. Just to let you know, because I know this stresses out students a lot too, is FilmLA is processing so many permits. A lot of times, once you submit, your permit coordinator gets in touch with you pretty fast, but that permit finalized doesn't come in until the week of your shoot, sometimes only a day or two in advance. That doesn't mean that you necessarily did something wrong, and you're always welcome to email your coordinator and just make sure you're on the same page. But just know, because we get a lot of students that come in where they're stressed out, where it's the week of and they don't have it. As hard as that is, it's okay. It is coming. It'll be there. So just know that sometimes even FilmLA runs a little bit behind. But you have an overview now of what you need for your permit, and that permit system is very in-depth. You are always welcome to come into the Playa Vista SPO office where Tyler is, or my office in Com Arts, and talk to us, and we will walk you through it. But one of the things that we can do today to really have you prepared for doing a permit is register your account. That's something when students comes in that takes a few minutes. So I'm going to drop the link to the homepage for FilmLA here. And I also had sent a link to the handbook page. I'll drop it one more time for the FilmLA process. This page in the handbook has a slideshow as well going over this. So that's a good resource for you too. But if you know right now that you're filming off campus and want to make an account and follow along with me, I'm just going to walk through it really fast. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This is FilmLA.com. This is what the dashboard will look like when you navigate to this page. And here in the top right corner, there's a My FilmLA tab. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And then it takes me to this page where I can either sign in with my existing account, or if I go look down here kind of small, it says sign up now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on sign up now. The FilmLA dashboard has changed and a lot of the system has been updated. So even if you previously have submitted a FilmLA permit, if it was as much as a year ago and not necessarily last semester, you probably need to make a new account because they were requiring that everyone make a new account again. So your information probably was not saved. If you did this last semester, you should be good. But if this was more than a year that you've done it, you probably need a new account. So you go ahead and you type in, you're gonna see all my autofill ones, your email address. I'm gonna use my Gmail just because I don't have an account through that one, I don't think. Just put that in for a second. But a lot of times students will also ask me, hey, do I need my line email? Can it be my Gmail? In order to qualify for the student discount, it actually doesn't matter which one you need. You do need your student letter, but a lot of times I do recommend just to do it through your line one so it's all hooked up through school. Once you put in your email, the trick of the new sign up system is you hit send verification code. Once you get that code, I'm just going to check really fast, see what my code was and if they've emailed it. All right, so I already got my code. So once I get my code, I'm going to go ahead and type it in. 134 and hit verify. If for some reason you didn't receive it, you can always send a new code. But this is kind of the odd thing about the sign up system is you do have to do that before it's going to allow you to put in a password. So now I would put in my password. I'm going to confirm it. And then it's going to ask me for my display name and given name. For me, for display name, I'm just going to put my name. Same here. My surname is Costanzo. And then you would go ahead and click on create. So then you would have an account. So this is a step that you could take as early as today if you want to go ahead and make an account, log in, kind of get familiar with the dashboard again. If you did this a year ago, it has all changed. And really today we're giving you sort of a brief overview of what you would want to prepare, kind of like we talked about how for your project you're going to need certain documents. But again, if you have specific questions or you need help doing that application, please come in or send us an email. We're more than happy to help. And we can really help you, especially if it's your first time doing a FilmLA permit, with the language you use. How do you explain where you're parking? How do you explain these different things? So we're more than happy to help with that as well.
So thank you so much, Sophia, for that. If anybody has questions, let us know. Hopefully, if you didn't have a FilmLA account prior to this, you took this example now because we know who's here. So when you come to see us, we hope that you already have a FilmLA account. That just quickens the process, and then we can show you from there. And then again, using the link in the handbook, it really breaks it down. And it might seem like, oh my gosh, it's changed, what's different? Really, once you kind of see the steps, it's really intuitive. You just like follow. So like you add the type of address, the type of residence, all of that. I will get back to sharing my screen to just show you some of the locations and like just things that you want to be aware of. So let me share my screen again. So yes, so some of the troublesome locations. So in the LA area, know that some places are easier to permit than others, even if it's literally like one street away or like one block away. It can dynamically change the amount of work that you may or may not need to do for your permit. So some areas to be aware of is Inglewood. Deb is like, don't even let them film in Inglewood just because of so much goes into it. So maybe don't ask to film there. But if you really do, if it's really a part of it, you see them Randy's Donuts. If you really just want to get like certain aesthetics, you can, but just be prepared for what might come with that. Culver City is another difficult place, and Venice is another difficult place. And when I say difficult, it's not impossible. It's just that there's more steps required. And then certain location types, like much like parks or public schools or beaches, those are also like harder than usual locations to permit, not because the application for them is different, but it's what you have to do. So like with beaches, you'll need a lifeguard. With public schools, you have to pay like LA, like, let me see, like you basically have to pay the school district at least $1,200 for them to film, just period. plus additional school monitors, which there's a minimum of like 4 to 6 hours. So you're looking at least $2,000 to $3,000 just to film at a public school. So you might want to kind of like keep that in mind. Let's see, LA parks are no longer taking permits. Oh, wow. So Jenny just put in the chat that like LA city parks are no longer taking permits.
Oh, no, are taking longer.
Oh, they're taking longer. Okay, so good thing. So you can still submit your permit, but they're taking even longer due to COVID. So just have that in mind, because again, with a lot of these, sometimes they don't even let you know until the week of, even if you submitted it early, if it's going to come through or not. So definitely email your FilmLA coordinator in advance, or info@filmla.com, so you can get a better idea. Because the worst thing is submitting it weeks in advance just for them to on the week thereof say that, oh, sorry, you'll need this and that, or it may not be available. And due to COVID, just really kind of get your communication in line and submit early. So again, on the bottom, I just put, please note that your FilmLA coordinator may contact you with additional requirements. So definitely just proactively ask. I will, let me see if I can, so if you can please put info@filmla.com in the chat, just have that email on deck, or even ask a member of the PAT team or SPO. Any questions, thank you. Any questions that you might have concerning that. So the next point is our project breakdowns. This number has since increased. This was taken at the very end of last semester, but I know there's more registered people. So there's a lot of people, not only just for FilmLA, but even just for on-campus permits. There's a lot of people that are registered in these classes. Some of these classes have up to 3 projects, and most of these projects don't film only at one location. So please have that in mind and get your submission started early. And now we will turn it into our question and answer section. This is my contact information, and I know you have Tyler, Sophia's, and Jenny's contact as well. So we're gonna stop the presentation and basically just open up to questions that you may have, because I know that's probably the most important part of this presentation. So please either put in the chat or just ask. Elijah?
Yeah, once again, I only have one question, also about time, funnily enough. I'm just wondering, because my film is going to be shot entirely on campus, how kind of strict are they in terms of like the time allotted for a certain like location? If I'm like, okay, it's, 3 hours, over at like the Bluff or whatever, like I'm just curious, because with film it can be so unpredictable. Sometimes it might be 15 minutes over, or sometimes you might get done early and be able to go to the next location. And so I'm wondering how regulated is that, because I'm sure when you're permitting outside of campus and in like the real world, it's a lot more strict, but in campus, is there some kind of leeway, even if you're trying to push to be in that allotted time and whatnot? I'm just curious.
Yeah, a lot of that depends. We can definitely give you like the heads up. For example, if you want to film on the Bluff, I would first, let me start out by saying you might want to permit for a little bit longer than you think that you might need, not egregiously long, like not like 5 hours longer, but give yourself some time to like take down. So for example, maybe like with the Bluff, they might not be as strict. If you have your permit, you're running maybe like 30 minutes over, they're not going to be upset at you and kick you out. They already see that you took the necessary precautions and you are students, you are learning. However, maybe locations like the library, they might be more strict. So if you said that you're only filming for 3 hours and now it's getting to 4 and 5 hours, the library might be more strict and kick you out. I would say it might be more stricter for indoor locations versus outdoor locations. And then also too, I think a lot of the strictness is based around like university events. So if there's a blackout date, most likely they might not let you film at all on that day. Or if they do, they'll kick you out because then they have an event in Sunken Gardens, for example. So it really just depends. I would say get an accurate estimate, but don't be scared if you run a little bit over. if anything, like if it's like the library, you could say, hey, like we did have this permit, we're running just a little bit over. There's always somebody working usually on the second floor or the first floor of the library. You can just, ask them that. For calm buildings, if you're filming outside, most likely we'll be fine. We know that stuff happens. This is a long way of saying it depends on the proctor, because each proctor is different in levels of strictness. Some people are like, oh, what's going on over here? And they're excited for you, happy to help you. And others are like, no, like, you said you would be done. I need you to leave at this time. So if you're worried about that, just go ahead and ask one of us about the specific location, and we can let you know, like, oh, make sure you're specific. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then another brief follow-up question. In terms of like catering, how do you recommend kind of setting up like a catering area when you are moving, when you are outside, or you are throughout like one day moving from place to place on campus? Is it just getting one of those plastic tables, or like what's kind of the optimal solution for that?
I think that's a good question. That's something I'll also to let Sophia chimed in, but back in my day, when I did it, I just had one of those like foldable like tables. So I would rent a production truck from Avon. I know a lot of people use Youll nowadays, but I would put in my Avon truck, I would take it out, put like a table cover, and then quickly set up my crafty. And then if I'm moving to another location on campus, I'll have a member of the team, most likely like some PAs already kind of put it together, start to move it to the next location and already have them set up as we wrap from that location. So that would be the easiest way for me. I wouldn't depend on locations already having a setup for you. Don't presume that, because you might be disappointed if the door is locked or if you don't have access, especially in this time of COVID. So I would say just definitely get one of those like foldable tables that you can use. Some places might even allow you to rent them. So there's that. I don't know if like Sophia or Tyler, if you guys have anything to add with that.
Yeah, I filmed my thesis on campus last semester, and I actually was filming in the parking lot. And so I talked to Jenny a lot, like, we're great resources for you. And I was like, what are some other on-campus locations where like I do have kind of a seating area or something? And, we brainstormed and came up with some. And so that's where I would say too, and I think Jenny put it in the chat as well, like trying to do your meals outdoors. Elijah, it sounds like your film's going to be outdoors. What I would recommend in your case specifically is talking to your assistant director and looking at that schedule. And on the day you're moving around, kind of see when lunch is going to hit and which location you're going to be coming from at that point. I've also found in my day when I've done company moves, sometimes you want to feed people before you move. Sometimes crews will try to move and everyone's hungry and you can kind of see morale
They'll get
down,
grumpy.
like, feed them, then move them. But yeah, so I would kind of look at the locations around your lunchtime and when you're moving and see like, okay, maybe one of your locations does have some tables where people can sit and spread out and eat. If not, like Jessica was saying, I had extra tables. I kind of kept like I bought those big boxes of chips. I just kept the box because it was easier to move or things like that. So you'll definitely kind of see to work it out. But I would definitely like, this is where I recommend location scouting. Even if you think an on-campus location, sometimes it'll surprise you of what you can come up with of being like, oh, I didn't think of that, or there's tables here. So since I was in the parking lot, I actually put in a permit request for an area where I was like, oh, there's some tables and I can stage people here and spread people out more. So you have some options. And like Jessica's saying, where she's like, oh, you could talk to Sophia or Tyler. A lot of times, even the other student workers in here have done projects and whatnot. So you're always welcome to come into either SPO and ask us from our own experiences too, what we've done.
Definitely. And another thing that I did, I don't know if they allow filming in this area anymore, but I had to film an office scene. It was a psychology village in Youll. And now I'm thinking like what I would have done in the time of COVID. So in the time of COVID, while we were filming there and like most people have to be masked, maybe you would have your lunch like right outside of like either by Rossi's, like right outside there, or maybe by the Einsteins, you can do it outdoors. So it's like your lunch doesn't have to necessarily be in the same place that you're permitted to film, but you can make that note in the permit application as Sophia suggested.
Yeah, and just make sure too, if you do move away from where you were filming, but you left equipment there, that at least one person's staying back and watching it. So, these are all things to kind of consider when you're doing your permits. Do you have the space to eat in that area? Do you need to permit an outdoor location? Do you have to, like when we were going through it, it asks if it's interior or exterior or both. So just keep that in mind as you're going through.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. That was a great question. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, we had a question in the chat from Jenny. What are some questions that FilmLA, like a FilmLA coordinator might ask us after we've submitted our documents?
That's a good question. Let me see. It's really dependent on the location. So if you guys have anything that kind of comes to mind, because the permit itself is very explicit, like you have to explicitly like list details. One question they might ask, well, what I see usually is them requesting for you to kind of fill out a form that they approve so that you can hand it to all the different neighbors. So that's like the number one thing that you'll see. They'll say like, okay, great, you're filming at your friend's house. Make sure you hand it out to all your neighbors so that they are aware. Sometimes they might ask you to have the neighbors sign it. That's very rare, but it's not uncommon at all. But mostly like as long as you leave a notice at least 24 hours before you start filming, which is like the latest, that's usually okay.
Just to let you guys know, and this kind of goes with Elijah's first question, something I thought of that sometimes people don't realize is FilmLA actually has hours for filming. So I know Elijah asked about on campus, what happens if like, oh, you ran over or under. With FilmLA, if you permitted a location for 12 hours and you come under, no one's going to care if you left. The problems are if you go over your hours, depending on your location or the city you're in, FilmLA might be more strict. And if you are filming in a neighborhood after 10 p.m. on the weekends, that's when you need neighbors to sign. So if you can finish filming before 10 and put on your permit before 10, your life's a lot easier where you're just notifying neighbors. What Jessica was mentioning with my case is I was doing an overnight shoot at this grocery store in Santa Monica, and FilmLA was like, you can do that, but you need signatures from these people. And that was the week of the shoot where we had to then go do that. So just be aware that the moment you step outside of those hours, and those hours are listed on the FilmLA website as well, that's typically when you need signatures. Also, something I saw a lot last semester when helping students is that coordinators sometimes, even though you put it in the permit, might just ask you the same questions. I pulled up an email just now that I got from my coordinator, and it asked me to double check location information because it was a sidewalk shoot, like we were on the sidewalk. So if you're ever outside or on a sidewalk like that, they're trying to verify because they're like, well, you can't really go into the street, or that's a whole other set of problems, you know? So sometimes they might ask you some more specific questions if it's a very particular location. They might want to clarify some different activities that you put down. A lot of times, a lot of students got follow-up emails from coordinators about parking. So sometimes students wouldn't necessarily go scout parking. They would just list it, or they would say, oh, they're parking on the street. Well, FilmLA really doesn't like when you park in a neighborhood on the street versus a driveway. Right. So I would recommend that's something you're checking out as well. So a lot of times they'll just follow up on some more specific questions of what you've already written down.
Definitely. And try not to get annoyed. Don't be like, I already put that in my permit. Why are you asking me this? Definitely just clarify just because it's more of like kind of like a legal thing. Like we want to make sure out of your own like typing, are you sure? And then another thing is like one thing, just as a side note, as a point of wisdom, there's some neighborhoods, like just use wisdom too. Like there's some neighborhoods where you probably don't want to be doing a night shoot there, and like for the safety of your crew. So keep that in mind. I know that parking was a huge part for them. They just want to make sure that things are there. Another thing to keep in mind is that certain parks, say you want to film at the park, certain parks might not allow you to film on the weekends. They might only allow you to film during the week. So you need to have that in mind. And then a lot of parks require park monitors, where it's like, they might charge you a traveling fee for them to get there, plus a 4-hour minimum of like $38 per hour just to film at a park. And sometimes they do approve that permit and let you know afterwards. So you might want to keep that in mind too when you're filming at a park. Much like beaches, make sure you know that you might need to hire a lifeguard. And then Sophia, I think for one of your sets, you had to have like somebody on duty that FilmLA assigned to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so every once in a while, FilmLA will actually assign you a FilmLA coordinator that comes to your shoot. In our case, it was because we were shooting on Abbot Kinney. And if you know Los Angeles and you know Abbot Kinney, it's one of the highest traffic streets. And so they were basically like, you can film there. Abbot Kinney, this was my lesson learned, also has like a business bureau that votes on if you can film there or not. So if you have something as specific as I did, FilmLA actually might have PDFs or notices, or as you're completing the permit, when you put in the address, you might actually get a note as you're going through typing it in that tells you what else you're going to need. So we knew there was a chance we were going to need a coordinator there. The coordinators aren't bad. You do have to pay them, so be prepared for extra fees if you are in a location as specific as that. But he was really nice. He introduced himself. He kind of just watched us from across the street. Like, it wasn't a problem. The most he told us since we were on the sidewalk was just like, hey, make sure you leave enough space that people don't have to step into the street around you, that they can still cross in front of the camera. So, you know, like, they're going to help you make sure you're doing a safe set, but sometimes you might need a coordinator. And FilmLA will let you know about that with enough time too, that like, if you get stuck in that position, I will say coordinators, they usually tell you sooner than signatures for some reason. But if you end up in a spot where that's out of budget, that's something you might want to think about too. Of like, can I afford a coordinator? I did have a student last semester who was shooting in a house in Tarzana, and it was a particular street where neighbors did not like filming there. And so when they went to get signatures, they actually said no. And it triggered a whole thing with FilmLA of they needed a coordinator. They needed 2 LAPD officers. It was a lot of extra. So always check in advance. Sometimes that's like Jessica was talking about, different locations and areas. Sometimes even if you're at a house, it can get a little tricky. So really make sure you're scouting and figuring out what you need for those locations.
Yeah, and always have, like, pro tip number 2, always have backup locations, because the worst thing is thinking that you're going to film at a house and then all the neighbors are like, no, we don't like you. We don't want any LMU students filming here. You need to be able to pivot, because like
Right.
Sophia said, it's not for free that they're sending all those coordinators and police officers. So make sure you have that. For anybody that wants to film in a national park, somebody had brought that up beforehand, so not in this training, but to me. So you can also to use that link to find out more about that. One thing with FilmLA, sometimes people pay somebody to have a location. I think this happened last semester, and then the location drops them. Maybe they didn't have like a real agreement, or they changed their mind, they wanted more money. You're able to still edit or pivot. So you can reach out to your FilmLA coordinator directly and say like, hey, like, I know you already approved this, but I need to change my address. More than likely, they will help you change that. Yeah. They'll just have you edit your permit. So that's okay. You're also able to add more. So the good thing is that, like, as long as you kind of have like a tight planning, you're also able to add up to 10 locations for one permit, which is great. So just keep certain things in mind. You might not want to be filming downtown, like walking down the street, because then just that triggers a lot. They just want to make sure that things are safe, and they want to know like the surveillance, because again, they're kind of quick with it, because they're not just dealing with you guys, they're dealing with HBO shows and CW, any part of filming. So relatively, we should be a small set. Everything should be good to go, but it's just good to have these aware and always have a backup, even for your own good. So you're not stressing. It's a lot to put all of your eggs in one basket. So just have that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was my lesson learned too with Abbott Kinney of, we ended up having a conflict on dates and switching dates, and FilmLA actually does work with you. They emailed us when we had an issue on the time and the date where we had already submitted the permit, and they said to us like, we will add it even though technically you're past the date, because you were ahead of it, like because you got your stuff in, we will help you out, like you let us know what you need. So if you're nice to them and you help them out and they'll help you out, and it's great, you know. So like Jessica was saying, just be patient, ask them questions, they're there to help you too.
Definitely. And worst case scenario, come running and screaming to us. We already have them on speed dial, so hopefully we can help you out, but we don't want to use that to exactly. Manners, they really, really do. I had a FilmLA coordinator that was ready to just be like, well, you didn't respond. The student didn't respond to this. I'm so sorry about that. He's just learning. Can you please help me with this? She helped me get that thing within 24 minutes. So it's just good to be polite. Okay, so we are at time. Thank you guys for coming to this training. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us. Look at the production handbook for more of the mandatory trainings that are coming up this next week and the week after that. And feel free to reach out to any one of us. If you want to reach out to the PAT team, that's us. If you want to reach out to SPO people, that's Tyler and Sophia. Will these presentations be posted anywhere? Jenny, I know we're recording it. I don't know. I believe we will be posting this. So just keep in touch, or like just kind of stay posted for communication on that. After the trainings are done, we'll make sure that you're able to access them anytime that you need them. All righty. Okay, they're going to be added to the production handbook. Perfect. So you will have access to this at any time. And then also too, you can also just manually search in the production handbook and find a lot of these guidelines spelled out for you in those documents. All righty, so if there's no more questions, thank you guys so much. Thank you to all my co-hosts and thank you to everybody for joining us on a Friday. I hope you have a lovely Friday afternoon, and we'll see you guys this semester. Alrighty. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.